thank you very much for joining this session. It's called Tomorrow Model-Driven Development. And this session is going to be about a lot of concepts, and we are also going to be showing a demo with the Spring Cloud. But before us, I would like to introduce ourselves. This is Mario Romano.
Hi, Mario Romano. I'm a full-stack developer. I work for Fresco on two projects, APS and ADF. I principally work with microservices, Spring, Angular 2, 3, 4, whatever it is now, the last version.
Yeah. So that's kind of nice, yeah. So my name is Mauricio Salatino, and yeah, I'm also a Java developer like for a long time. But my background it's really related with these approaches for developing software. That it's BPM and rules. And I'm also working for Alfresco right now. I'm in charge of the Activity 7 as a technical leader. So it's an open source project to do some of this kind of stuff that we are going to be showing. This presentation, it's not about that. It's about trying to open a discussion about how DDD is today, what it's proposing, and how is it compared to some other approaches. And then we are going to also, as I mentioned, we are going to show a demo about what do we think that is something that we can do and in order to get DDD working with some of these other approaches. And we believe that this is very important because even like DDD and these other approaches are focused in bringing more business value, trying to help us as developers to understand how our companies are doing different type of works, how to solve different problems. So the presentation, we will be split in two halves. I will be doing all the conceptual part at the beginning, so please don't fall asleep. And then the second part, Mario will be doing some demo about how we can implement these concepts in reality. Again, this is not this is not a DDD talk, so I will be going over some concepts quite quickly, just to make sure that we are all in the same page when we describe some of the things that we are going to be showing. So from the theoretical point of view, I will start talking about DDD. How many of you guys knows what DDD is? Okay, raise your hands. Okay, I would say half. How many of you guys are implementing this stuff from the ones that raised their hands? Say 10, okay. How many of you guys are core DDD experts and like heavy DDD users? None? One? I'm pretty sure that guy is very an expert, so that's good. So DDD, for you guys, if you don't know about this, so this is basically the theoretical background for what we today call microservices, and this is basically an approach to create these very high quality model designs to meet core business objectives. And this definition of the approach of developing software is kind of like important to me because it's making a focus in building models and at the same time making sure that those models are completely aligned with the company and what the company is doing. And that's a very important thing because I've read about these kind of things before. So when I started reading about DDD and what it's proposing, I felt like comfortable because most of the ideas there, they make sense, right? If we want to make nice and good software that scales and that it's helping the company to differentiate from their competitors, we definitely need to understand the problems that we are trying to solve with the people that knows how to solve the problems in real life. So that's kind of important. So when I start reading about this, mostly this second book here, it's divided in 3 conceptual blocks, like in 3 conceptual parts that they explain different things. The first one is the core business value, trying to understand, again, what is our differentiation from another companies that are doing the same. In order to do that, they introduce these concepts of domains, subdomains, and core domains, where we can just understand and scope a little bit more what is the important for our what are the important bits from our company to succeed. As soon as we recognize what is our core domain, we start like going deeper and trying to define what they call business context, bounded context, that represent a very scoped place, a very scoped problem to solve. Inside this problem that we are trying to solve, we will have a shared language, this idea of that people in real life, they will use a very specific set of terms in order to define how to solve the problems that they are trying to tackle. And when we put these two things together, like the scope and the shared language, we are going to start creating models. And these models are quite specific and they are quite well defined in general terms. They spend a lot of time in trying to explain us how the model should look like and what are the best practices to achieve that model. But the more important part is that model is not going to be created by software developers, but it's going to also be created by domain experts, the people that knows how to solve the problems in real life, right? And who are these domain experts? So it really depends on your industry. So if you are working, for example, in healthcare, or as the demo that we are going to show, it's showing an emergency service, right? People that it's in charge to coordinating hospitals and ambulances and firefighters and different entities. If you go to one of a company that is solving that problem, you will find out that the domain experts there are the ones that knows how to coordinate all these different entities and knows about the procedures, about what to do when an emergency is reported. So we need to go to our domains. We need to find out what is the most important thing for our company to work on. And then we need to identify what are the not so important things, so we can delegate that, or we cannot focus on things that are not as important as the things that we should be focusing. When we start understanding our bounded context and our domains, then we can use context maps in order to understand how these bounded contexts interact. And DDD spends, of course, a lot of more time trying to describe the relationship between different bounded contexts. So, for example, upstream and downstream, and they have a whole vocabulary to say, okay, if you have these relationships, you need to be careful, because if your project that you're working on depends on some other project, then what's the relationship? Are you going to fail if the other project fails? Well, we need to understand all of this. Let's go. That's the first part, and I do believe that this is really important, because it's definitely help us developers to understand that we definitely need to focus on whatever the company is trying to solve, not much about the technology, not much about how we propose a solution to it, but more working with domain experts to find the best solution and to keep iterating and improving that solution. No matter which technology do we use. So the first part, it's not about technology, it's more about core concepts and about how do we find those in our domains. The second part is about, okay, so again, concepts that we as developers might know, but we messed it up most of the time, right? So when we talk about entities, value objects, those are things that we kind of like know. So we all know what an entity is. We all know that we have JPA entities, but that's not what the domain entity is, right? So the book spends a chapter, the second book, it spends a chapter describing what an entity is, how do we model it, and how do we avoid creating anemic models, these POJO models where we have JPA entities that are going to be stored in the database, and we created the whole design just thinking about how we are going to persist the data. So if we have those situations, we are going to really mess it up, because our business logic is going to move to different places. It's going to spread in our services and in our UIs probably as well. The other concept that I wanted to mention is domain events. That's another important one in my opinion, because it's something that before we weren't used to do, or at least we didn't think that much. And domain events are used in order to notify the external world what are the things that are happening inside of our software that is important for the external world, right? In the case of the emergency, it's not the same to expose to a business user all the messages that are arriving in the message broker that when an emergency request is coming, than exposing an event that says, okay, a new emergency arrived, now I'm dealing with the emergency, now something happened, right? This high-level abstraction, to be included in our domain models, it's really important to me, because now we have this tool in order to expose some business information to people that is dealing with these things. We have modules, we have aggregates, and then, of course, for each of these topics, you need to go and read and learn more about it. But for services, it's another thing that we usually messed up, right? What is a service and what is not a service? The book spend a lot of time in describing those kind of things. Factories and repositories, different type of repositories, how do we mess it up with factories and all that stuff? Totally recommended to read. And then the other part is set of recommended patterns, a set of recommended tools that we as software engineers, we need to learn. We need to learn about these things mostly because it will help us to solve problems in distributed and high complex applications that we will try to build if we go into microservices, knowing about CQRS, event sourcing, abstraction layers. We need to know about this stuff. And the main problem is that we need to know about all this stuff in order to be able to choose the best tool for the job. It's not easy. We need to keep learning that. That's the main idea. Yesterday we had a talk about CQRS. It was quite good. So we need to keep doing these kind of conferences to go over these topics. Each of these topics is an hour talk about the thing. So we need to keep learning. So key takeaways from DDD in general terms is, okay, if we are applying DDD or if we are looking into this, the main idea is that we focus on whatever is important for the company. We just focused in the core domain. We focus in the core business contexts, bounded contexts that are defined. And we try to do that in a coherent way. We try to create these models that are clean and simple and can be shared with domain experts. We need to collaborate with them. But more importantly, and I think that it's at the end, is that if we try to apply this, we need to know that there will be a huge cultural change required for the company. If we want to apply DDD, we need to know that we will need to restructure our teams. We need to learn about how to work with domain experts. We cannot work in isolation. We need to be in the same part of the same team, and we need to collaborate in order to improve things. Again, if we are adding and removing stuff, we need to focus on business value. We cannot focus on technology. We cannot focus on anything else besides what is this change going to give to the company and what is going to help us to the company to solve. From the best tools and practices, again, we need to gain a deep understanding about what we are trying to solve. And in order, when we know what we are trying to solve, we will need to be able to choose the best tool for the job. We will need to know our patterns. We will need to know what are the technologies that we can apply to that. And then we will need to keep working on our models. So as soon as we define our models and they are clearly scoped, we need to keep improving. That's the key part of that. Again, because we are doing this, we are working in these ideas of bounded context, we will be able to create different shape of teams. We will be able to put different people in different teams in a completely different way that we were used to work before. And this is all related with the idea of microservices. A team per service, very focused on what they are doing. They need to know about the problem that they are trying to solve, and they need to become an expert on that. Again, they are not only developers. They are domain experts and developers. So what happened? So to me, this is kind of like the personal experience. When I started reading about DDD, and because of my background, I knew about business process management and decision management, which are other approaches. These other approaches, they are not coming from the same origin that DDD. DDD was created from a couple of software developers, consultants, that they had a lot of experience. They know a lot about distributed and complex systems. But these other approaches, they were created by the industry, right? So several companies that realized that they need to work with domain experts in order to create models and refine those models in order to improve how they do their work. In VPM, they have this concept of business process, which basically represents how people and systems work together, right? Again, this is not about technology. This is about how to make a company work better, how to improve the work that they are doing in order to beat the competition, basically. Decision management, the same. They build these models, these decision models, which might be decision tables or decision trees, that basically specify or define how decisions are made. If you are in an industry where you need to make very, very important decisions about how do you do your sales or how to manufacture something, you need to record that because that's part of your domain and core business logic that you are providing to your customers. So these two approaches, again, they are not related with technology. They were created like long time ago. And what happened is that some of the guys from the software industry, they realized that these approaches are kind of like good. So what they decided to do is they decided to create some tools to automate these models, right? So you have models that says how people and systems work together. You have models that define how to make decisions. So they created some libraries or software or services to deal with this automation. In a similar way that DDD is automating their models because they are Java models that are going to be run in the JVM, they created some libraries and some frameworks to do that. The key thing from these approaches is that because they were created by the industry, they spend a lot of time. So a lot of companies from the retail field, from logistics, from healthcare, from manufacturing, they have worked so much into these models, into refining these models, that all these models are standardized. Meaning that the industry, they believe that there is a lot of value in having their knowledge represented by different models. In the same way that we believe as software engineers that we need to create these clean models where we are going to host all the logic, all the business logic of the application or the service, and the data and the behavior of the application, they believe that their domain experts can understand better these models because these models are a little bit more simple and more high level, more abstract. Okay, so when we talk about BPM, you will see this kind of stuff, right? So we have here a business process that it's defining how to deal with a fire emergency, right? The first thing is a person preparing a fire emergency kit. The second one is someone is dispatching an ambulance. And when we dispatch an ambulance to a place to pick up someone, we need to record where the ambulance is, and we also need to keep notifying the hospital where the ambulance is going to go after the emergency. if you go to your father, mother, aunt, you can show this diagram, and they will kind of understand what's happening and what are the things that you need to do in order to deal with a fire emergency, right? The same thing with the decision table in decision management. No more microphone, I would say. Anyway, I can speak louder. So in the decision table, you will have this kind of stuff where you have this data, different information, and different rules and different values to define if someone is eligible to join a course or not. Again, if you go to anyone working in a bank or in a hospital institution, they will know how to read that, and they will know how to make a decision based on that. If you give a patient or a person and none of this is met, so they are not going to be eligible for something, right? So the similarities from both approaches, and this is where it becomes really important. All the similarities, there is a lot of things similar. So if you ask me, how do I explain BPM and decision management, I would say that I can use the same slides for DDD, right? So we will focus on whatever is important. We are going to build a model. We are going to add stuff or remove stuff depending on the business value. And again, yeah, we will just need to use the best tool for the job. So if you have a very procedural thing, you are going to use BPM. If you have a more decision-like thing, you are going to use BPM, decision management. So again, the key thing from all these approaches is the idea of centralizing knowledge and making sure that your domain experts, they understand how the solution, the software that we are going to implement, it will work. In VPM, they do it because they understand how the model is and they know how to expect the things to evolve. No matter which of this approach do we use, we are going to gain more understanding about our own domain. And and we will keep refining that in a very agile way, because BPM, decision management, DDD, they all suggest to go agile, right? So we need to improve, we need to create the model, we need to keep looking at the model, we need to keep looking at the bottlenecks, and we need to keep improving constantly. Again, as I mentioned with DDD, an important cultural change is required no matter which of these approaches do you use. So the main differences from this is, again, the model, what the model means, right? So what is a model? It really depends, depending on the approach. In DDD, it's a well-crafted Java model. I would say Java or any language that you're using, right? It's not depending on the language. But I think that we can all agree that it's a very technical model in the end, right? And I would say that, at least in my opinion, it's a very difficult task to have a clean model that you can share with your domain experts. I'm pretty sure that we can achieve that, but you definitely need to be in a very, very advanced stage where you have your model clean enough, where you have your terminology clean enough to be able to share that with your domain experts. I do believe that it can be done. It's hard, and it takes some time. In BPM and in decision management, you ended up having these charts or these metaphors, these decision tables that can be extracted like in a JSON file or in an XML file, and you can render those in a way that non-technical people can understand them. So the question that I'm asking here is that can we mix both worlds, and can we try to use both together in the best way possible so we can get the expressivity of VPM and decision management, and at the same time using all the interesting concepts and patterns and architectural recommendations from DDD. And I do believe that we can do it, and we should do it. And that's the key thing. And now Mario is going to show a little bit about the implementation of an example that we created using Spring Cloud, integrating several bits together, showing a little bit of this process automation, but most importantly, trying to show these patterns in action. The example that Mario is going to show, it's related again with this emergency scenario, where basically, logically, what a business user is going to expect is to go through these steps, right? An emergency request arrives. We need to pick that request. We need to enrich and process that request in order to understand more about the emergency and what's happening there. And then at the end of the day, we will need to pick, or the expert, we will need to pick one of these emergency procedures that we can have a lot, and that needs to be triggered, right? So Mario, show that.
Okay, I think I have enough time to show it.
Yep.
Okay, now we have talked for 20 minutes, so you expect to see a cool demo. Hopefully this will work, because we have a lot of things going on inside our demo. We have a lot of microservices, Docker image. It could crash.
Yeah, so we have 10 JVMs, 4 Docker images, discovery services. It will crash for sure.
So we have 3 microservices from the beginning. They run inside the Spring Cloud Data Flow. We use Spring Cloud Data Flow to register this service to use the message bus. All these microservices are loose coupled, so they use the message bus to communicate each other, but they don't even know that other service exists. Of course, we have Azure Gateway to communicate inside and outside. The enricher service use these other external service that are on top to get information and enrich the emergency call with information about the user, the location, and the code of the emergency. And also we have an Eureka discovery system to get all the microservices be able to be discovered. And here is where we have all the emergency procedure. We use activity for some of them, but you could use anything in there in the end. And because we are using microservices and it's in a hell, we have something to trace the calls between microservices. Otherwise, if something explodes in between, we will not know what happened. Also, maybe you are not going to trust me when I tell you that all this thing happened. So we are going to see with Zipkin how the calls go through all the microservices. And on the left here, we have all the infrastructure things that, as Mauricio said, are more things about that change slowly. You don't change this often. Also, maybe it's not your domain expertise. Things more that maybe you don't know even how to build. Maybe someone else will build this thing for you. And this is more where the domain knowledge are. So when you go to one of your customers, they know exactly what is in there. When they have to build one of the emergency procedure, they know exactly what does it mean an emergency procedure for them. And also another problem with this thing is they change quite fast, quite often. And so you want to be flexible there. You want to have a level of abstraction. You don't want to just have a code that is in boundary you cannot change. Also, we have there the emergency dispatcher that is quite messy for now. Also, this is going to be to show the fact that if you don't use DDD as you should do it, you may end up having a lot of mess inside your microservices. And yeah, that's it. Now I'll write some code. So
yeah. If I can just add something here, it's again, it's around the emergency dispatcher and all the procedures. It's basically the domain expertise of the company, right? All the other stuff is just infrastructure that you as a company wouldn't want to build, right? You don't want to build a gateway because a gateway already exists.
Yeah.
Why do you spend time on that? You don't want to build like a location services. You can just use Google Maps or whatever. So this is all about like focusing on the important stuff. And if you take a look at the repository of the demo, that there was a slide with the repository, no worries. If you take a look at that, if you take a look at the repository, you will see that in order to code this demo, we didn't spend much time and we didn't write so much code because the important stuff is inside the emergency dispatcher and in the procedures by themselves. All the other stuff is a Spring Cloud, and we are just reusing stuff that we should reuse.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah. So I'll start from the terminal. So as we said, we have Spring Cloud data flow running. In this thing, we define all the 3 microservices: the enricher, the dispatcher, and the source. Let me get the browser so I can show you. Mm-hmm. Each of these microservices has a topic, so they know what each of the message of this microservice is associated topic. So this is how they understand that there is a message from them. Now, how data flow works, you need to deploy this thing inside your Spring data flow. So I'm going to do it running a couple of commands. Okay.
Yep.
Source. No.
Another one. So what Mario is doing now is
because they are already registered.
okay. Yeah. So you can deploy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Mario is doing is defining a pipeline of how to deal with the incoming messages from requests, and that pipeline will define how the messages are enriched and processed in the last step.
Yeah.
So he's deploying the pipeline now.
Yeah, we
And
have
it will look
deployed.
like that.
It's deploying. This
Yeah.
thing will take a while. In the meanwhile, we can get up our discovery service. Should be this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's going to boot up all the
Still the Spring Boot.
Yeah.
Eureka. Service. Let's go in the browser. See when it's taking it up.
that's Eureka.
Take a while.
So we decided to do this live just to show that everything is
something.
independent, yeah, and to show, and to show how complicated it gets quite easily, and how everything works together quite nicely if the demo works, right? You should be able to see everything working in no time. We created this demo in almost no time as well, so
Yes, I did.
mostly because it's just about understanding the right tools that you need to use in order to provide this infrastructure. But it doesn't take long. So if you have a problem, you just need to know what is available out there and then how to use it. It's up. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yep. Also, we have the emergency source here, which is one of the three microservices that we are deploying through Spring Data Flow. The other three are coming slowly. We should be able to see it in a while. So now the discovery system is discovering the other services. We didn't write any code inside any of these microservices to let them know that that they have to point to this address. It's all Spring magic. They get discovery.
Annotations, and
Yeah.
that's done.
Okay. So next thing is the gateway.
Yep.
You want to put up a gateway because you want to have a single point to access to your services. As long as you know what is the name of your service, you know that pointing at that address, adding the name of your service, you can have access to it.
How many of you guys knows about the Spring Cloud data flow? Okay, good stuff. Like 3. Interesting. So that infrastructure is doing kind of like a lot of stuff. Part of what it does, it allows you to define pipelines, streams of data. And then the other part is, as Mario mentioned, we have a data flow server that that basically it provides different implementations. The main idea is that you can run it in your laptop, and then you can just run it in Kubernetes. You can run it on AWS, and you can run it on Mesos. So it provides a lot of infrastructure.
Also, you have a level of abstraction on top.
You have a high level of abstraction there where you can use Maven artifacts to register your components, and it will automatically bootstrap all these microservices.
Yep.
Or you can provide Docker images as well, which is
Okay. I'll bootstrap some other services that are the ones that we described before, the domain knowledge services, also the infrastructural services.
Yep. So a lot of JVM processing there. Yeah. Good stuff. And you should be able to see that they are automatically registered.
So they will become part of the gateway, but also Eureka will discover them. Now we have the gateway.
How many of you guys knows about Zul, the gateway? Okay, a lot of people, yeah. So basically the gateway, again, it's just a facade on top of your services, and what it does when you bind it to Eureka is that as soon as you register a new service here in Eureka in the service registry, it will automatically route into the application context all your calls. So if you have a service behind that gateway, you can call to that service going through the gateway, and it will automatically route your requests to that service. So you can, you can use a single point of access to all your services. What's that?
What's up?
That's what's up. Nice. Okay, so almost there, right?
Yeah, we need the other two services coming up.
Oh, 2 services. Okay, good.
See the routers.
Yeah.
So it's going in there.
Just for them to know, we already bootstrap Docker with Zipkin.
I can show this thing.
Yeah.
So we have a Docker image with RabbitMQ. This is used by Spring Data Flow for the message bus.
Which is exploding.
Uh,
Anyway.
no, it's not.
No, it's nothing. It should be nothing. Yeah.
And then we have Zipkin for the tracing, and also we run our process services that I'll show you later.
Yeah.
The activity process service. So we have here the default process, another one.
Again, because we are using this Eureka as a service registry, what we can do is we can bootstrap as many of these procedures, these emergency procedures as we want. And in runtime, those procedures will be automatically discovered and picked up by the emergency dispatcher, right? So we have some logic there in order to say, okay, if the emergency looks like this, we will go to the registry, we will find out which is the procedure that best matches with that emergency.
Okay, yeah. So now all the services are up. They got registered with the Eureka. So we have all these services here. We have the emergency procedure A at the default position, and also we have the infrastructural services. Now what we will do, we will make a call through the emergency source service. It will be sending an emergency message on the queue. This message will be also picked by the enricher, which will reach the emergency call with the locations, the emergency code, and the information about the patients. And in the end, this service here, the emergency dispatcher, which is the one that knows what are the emergency procedures up and running, will do some evaluation of the emergency, and will decide which procedures is the best procedure to proceed. Let's try to make a call. So now we have a REST call here. We are calling our gateway, which is on the port 8080, and hopefully this thing will work.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see with the tracer what are the code that actually have been made behind the scene. This one is a really important tool. You need to use it if you use microservices. Otherwise, you will die soon.
Yeah, it gets quite complex if you don't see what's going on. Like, yeah.
Okay, this is our call. So you can see here the tracing of all the call through our microservices. We have the source microservices, the enricher, as I told you, that is calling the geolocation map of Google, and then is finding our patients inside the storage, and also is sending the message to the dispatcher, which does the evaluation, and then our dispatcher decide that the best procedure to be called is the procedure A. So now if we change our REST call, we change the code, this evaluation will be different. Hopefully we will call another procedure.
Yeah. Yeah. Now much faster. Nice. Good.
At this time, instead of calling the procedure A, we have been calling the procedure the default procedure. Let's have a look inside the dispatcher, which has, I would say, the messy code inside.
It's always good to show messy code in a large screen. So
yeah, so you cannot really read this code in an easy way. You cannot even show this code to your customers and say, look, I'm taking some decision here, I'm doing some stuff, and through these things that I'm doing, I'm calling this procedure instead of this other one. Usually what will be better used in this case would be something like a decision table, a rules engine, to have a level of abstraction, also something that you can actually translate in the real world, and not this code that is not actually, not easy readable. Not because Mauricio wrote it.
So I wrote it, and it's quite easy to see that we are calling the discovery client, so we are calling the registry, the service registry, then we are just evaluating some scores, we are doing some calculations there, and then we are making a decision. And by just doing that, with two simple things, the code, it gets really, really messy. You can definitely refactor this a lot of times in order to make sure that it's clean enough, but it gets really complex, and you need to keep an eye on that.
Also, the question is how many times then you need to refactor this thing in order to add many other procedures inside your flow.
Yeah.
So this for sure is not part of the static world that we talked before on infrastructural things.
Yeah.
Another thing that is worthy to, I think, to show is
Whoa.
this is the procedure. Well, this just does when starts, it get discovered by the client, the Eureka, and also send some metadata to say, looks, my score in case something happened to call this procedure is 40, and it also offer a REST endpoint through you can call.
You need to make it small because it's too large. Yeah, and that's it.
Can you read it?
Yeah.
Okay. It offers a REST endpoint through you can start actually the process, and behind the scene, this thing as a process use activity. So we have our process here defined in BPMN, and that's really any. It's just an example. It shows a message, a print line, but could be something more complex. Depends what is your domain.
Yeah, quick note, in order to have the process engine there in our microservice, we are just auto-wiring the runtime service of the process engine, that it's going to basically automate our business model. So the example that I showed there, the model that I showed showing how to deal with fire emergencies, it can be quickly executed by this runtime here.
And
you can show the...
Yeah, as you said, it's really easy to bring inside to build a new one of this procedure service. This is the Spring Initializer tool. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it's a tool that allows you to create a new Spring Boot application. I choose here some dependencies, web, Azure, H2 as a database. Then we have the Zipkin for the tracing, and the Eureka discovering to get this service be discovered. Let's call it, I don't know, emergency service epsilon. And you can put inside also our process service, generating the project. You will have already all the things that you need. And in the Finder. Let's create a new service live. Let's see if we have enough time.
Yep. How much time?
10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes. Okay.
Let's try.
He wants to have another JVM running there.
I want to see if it explodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Window. To J, you can do it. Okay, got the source here. So what you usually do, you enable the discovery of this service. And also another thing that I would say, let's create REST endpoint.
Yeah.
I'm putting everything in one single class. Do not do this thing at home. It's bad.
Yeah, so while you code that, so kind of like important from the example point of view is that, you are going to, you probably end up doing something like this at some point where you just need to auto-discover stuff. You need to register stuff dynamically because everything is changing, or everything is changing versions, or you have new versions of the things that you're working on. So by doing this, you can like quickly do that by just adding some dependencies. And
I don't think we have enough time to write the whole thing, but I have an X service already built, which will be.
Yeah, because I just,
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So basically what I was trying to do is exactly this thing. So create a new service that doesn't, we already need enable discovering. I create a request map, a REST controller here with offering a new microservices. Then what you usually do when you download a new Spring Boot application with activity, you create a new folder here, which is processes. You drag in this folder a new BPMN file with the definition of your process. And then you need the runtime service actually to start the service. We are starting the service this time by key, which is the key that our process has. So now we can run it. It will be automatically discovered by other
and again,
services.
Just a quick note of that. By running a process, it doesn't mean that you cannot apply DDD. Quite the opposite. You will need to apply DDD and maybe a process to solve a very particular situation. We are not saying that you need to use processes all the time. You just need to use processes whenever you have a sequence of things, a sequence of interactions between people and systems. You can use a business process for that, or you can code that manually. In any way, you will need to be able to share that with the business, right? And some of the things that business processes are quite good at is at exposing domain events. One of the key things in DDD that I mentioned before, of saying, okay, we have a business representation about what needs to be done, about the interactions between people and systems, and the process engine by itself, when it's automating that process, it's going to be emitting all these events, so you can capture those. You don't really need to do much. It's already there, provided by the runtime.
Yeah.
Waiting for the...
Do we want
It's
to show?
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it worked. Did you have any doubt about that?
No, that's maybe just it blows up.
Let's see also if we have it in the gateway.
Yep.
Yeah, it's also in the gateway. 5 minutes left.
Okay. Conclusions.
Yeah, that's good.
So my recommendation is, this is a quite complex thing, and there is a lot of projects there. If you go and take a look at the repository that Mario is going to share now, the next slide, you will find that, again, there is not much code. You can run it by your own. You can take a look at Zipkin and take a look at the traces, so to understand what's going on. There are a lot of things that we can improve there. We can use circuit breakers. We didn't have time to include all of that, but you can do that. It's quite simple, to be honest. It's just one day work of each of the topics. So I totally recommend you to run this and send questions to the GitHub repository, send questions to Twitter, send questions to the blog or whatever. Right? And just to finalize this talk is that we do believe, from my experience coming from the BPM and decision world, we do believe that the tools, so what happens is that most of the microservice people, they get a little bit scared when they start hearing about processes and decisions and workflows in general. But this is much more about that. When I describe BPM and decision management, I told you guys that this is not about technology, it's about how to make companies work better. So we definitely need to listen a little bit more to the industry, listen a little bit more about what they are already doing in order to adopt their best practices and try to merge that with our best practices. I do believe that DDD is a huge step forward in the software development industry, and at the same time, I do believe that we can take the best from the other worlds. So because of that, and because we know that all the BPM and decision management stuff, it's quite old, we are going to do this. This is Activity 7. It's an open source project. It's hosted there in activity.org. And we are creating a new version that it's going to be built on top of a Spring Boot and a Spring Cloud, mostly because we know that these tools need to be adapted to modern environments. Most of these tools in the past, and if you take a look at its history, they were all created before distributed environments in general, right? Before we had cloud providers and Kubernetes, right? So they were built like based on different patterns, and what we are doing is we are adapting all these tools to work there. The main objective of this tool, again, and all these tools, Activity is the process engine, the process runtime, but we are building some other tools as well that will help you to help people to get the stuff done in a better way, and to make sure that we export and we expose business data as much as possible. So we will be working on these projects. We are going to announce this in July. This is kind of like a pre-release kind of thing. So if you want to join us, this is an excellent opportunity to work with these technologies in the community, of course, or just get in touch and we can see if you're interested how to work on these things. If you have some experience around these topics, this is a really nice opportunity to learn more, use these tools, and get involved with a community that it's going to be providing some tools for companies to do this kind of business automation and improvement heavily based on DDD and models, basically. So that's pretty much it, I would say. Questions? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Like 2 minutes? Yeah.
No,
More? Guys, questions? I'm going to be here today and tomorrow, and if you want to grab me, if I know that we went through a lot of different topics, a lot of different concepts, but the main idea was starting mentioning all these things so we can open a discussion. If you're interested in DDD, if you're interested in any of the other topics or even a Spring Cloud, please get in touch and yeah, we can start the discussion.
Also, the demo is on GitHub.
The demo is on GitHub, so you can just run it, and I will just put that slide back again. It's, there one. Just please feel free to download that, and I think that they represent quite like a good example about how to put things together.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just find an example of how to use Eureka, how to use the gateway, but not how to use everything together, and sometimes it's kind of like useful. Questions?
Yes. Currently, we are using the version 6 of Activity.
Yes, good question. Yeah.
We would like to know if it's going to be difficult to migrate from version 6 to version 7.
That's a very good question, and that's the main reason why I recommend you to join the community, mostly, because you will be updated into those topics, and we are planning the next version, and it will be different mostly because the infrastructure is different nowadays. I don't think that you will have too much troubles. It really depends on your infrastructure and how you are using it, but I would say that I wouldn't expect that it will be complicated. Hopefully that answers your question. I cannot see your face, so I don't see if you're panicking or not.
But it's going to be like like automatically. It's going to be possible to change the version of Activity and have the same processes working, or
It's a fair enough questions. We need to discuss that in the community. Those are the kind of discussions that we are having in the community now. That's why I totally recommend you to join there.
Okay.
Because if you join, you will be able to plan ahead. And just to quickly answer that question is that, do you want to update the version? That means that you are embedding it like as a library. But now we are talking about microservices. So you usually don't do that anymore. So it's up to your environment. If you have an infrastructure where you depend that as library, yeah, you will be able to update the version and use it.
Okay.
As you are using it today, yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Other questions? Who knows Activity from here? Okay. You cannot raise your hand. So one guy, two guys. Good. Yeah. Again, yeah, these are some of the tools that are very like in a niche. When you start learning about these things, you can just kind of like change the mindset of saying, okay, so we are building software, but how we can keep improving and stuff. And as soon as you learn this, you have another tool to use in your toolbox to use when you are creating new stuff. True, most of these tools are not completely up to date to modern environments. We are working towards that, and we will appreciate your help if you are an expert on the technology side, right? So feel free to join there. No more questions? Thank you very much then.